Hello, everyone. Welcome to this new webinar. We're here with attorney Ruby Powers from Powers Law Group, and we're going to talk about dealing with deportation, what not to do in immigration court. So Ruby, she is board certified immigration and nationality attorney. She has been licensed since 2008, and she founded the firm in 2009. So Ruby, the word is yours.
Thank you, Maria. Well, so there's a lot of talk right now about mass deportation, detention. So we're not necessarily speaking about that, but we were planning to talk about this anyway for just people to know your rights, know some of your options and things like that. So immigration court is under the Department of Justice, and there's the Executive Office of Immigration Review that sits underneath Department of Justice. And there's immigration judges, not juries, are the ones that make decisions. And the judges have to be attorneys. They don't necessarily have to have immigration experience. Some of them have worked in other areas of law, and their first experience with immigration is this position, but they're put through some training for a little while to understand a little bit more about immigration. So, and many times they'll have prior trial attorneys or those who worked in the government for like to usually move up to being coming judges a lot of times. And there's a handful of private attorneys who've also become judges as well. So basically you have to prove your case and explain what your form of relief is a way of saying like what you're applying for. And if you get approved, then you can be, out of court. Or you could also, what's happened under Biden is be able to get your case dismissed or terminated in some cases. I think we're going to see a lot less of that with prosecutorial discretion probably going away in many cases under the Trump administration. So let's go through a little bit. Um, Generally, there's around 63 immigration courts. There's a lot of growth happening, so that number might be changing soon, and around 400 immigration judge, which is not really a lot if you consider the amount. I think there's almost 2 million people in immigration court, actually. So the case that can involve immigrants accused of crimes that might get them detected in the first place, those who are detained, sometimes asylum seekers. It could be people who had applied for something and it got denied. So ultimately, the judge is determining, looks at the case on all the totality of circumstances and evaluates whether or not they should be approved or not and what form of relief. So these two words are used interchangeably many times, but basically deportation refers to the formal removal of a foreign national for violating immigration law. Removal is a legal term used by immigration judges. So sometimes they'll say deportation court or deportation order or things like that. So reasons for deportation could be violating visa terms, committing certain crimes, threats to public safety, not and not having another form of relief. So they're generally initiated not necessarily by the immigration judge, but you have to be put in court somehow. So it could be through USCIS if your asylum case is referred to the court, or through USCIS if your adjustment or something is denied and they later give you a notice to appear. It could also come from the border. It also could be if you're traveling, you come in and then you're initiated with an NTA. So it comes from different ways. So NTA, that's another word I just said. So notice to appear. This is the one that's formally charging you to and telling you you're supposed to go to court. So it's supposed to have the date, the time, the location of your hearing. There's been some whole litigation about that. And then also what the charges are. So this is a pretty important document. So if there's any weaknesses in it, this could be challenged and maybe you aren't officially in court. So we've seen that happen where people got a piece of paper that said notice to appear, but it wasn't officially filed with the court. So we've seen a lot of craziness over the last few years. Now, attendance is mandatory, and sometimes you can attend via WebEx. If your case is in another location, you might want to do a change of venue, but it also can affect your asylum clock if you've applied for asylum. Now, failure to appear could result in removal issued in absentia, which means that you have a deportation order by not being there. And that's pretty serious. So you don't want to have that because it can be really hard to overcome that. Now, initially, let's say the notice to appear was improperly filed and you're getting sent to court. There's the master calendar hearing. And this is when the judge is asking you, where do you live? Are these allegations true? Do you concede the charge? And what are you applying for? It's sort of like we call it the master calendar hearing because it's sort of like you're calendaring, but you're also sort of like sort of, what do you call it, like not housekeeping, but it's sort of like you're getting things in order and you're trying to figure out what you're going to do. And so this is a really important step, and you want to come prepared, ideally with an attorney. Now sometimes the judge might give you another hearing if you don't come with an attorney, but it's important to note that if you delay your case in any way, it could stop your asylum clock if you had applied for asylum. So consider that in all of your actions as well. Now, the final hearing, which we either call the individual hearing or the merits hearing on the merits, is that final big one. And this is when you present your case. And you really should have an attorney for this one. And you need to have an attorney before, because you need to have time to prepare and have them review and be ready for it. So this really consists of a little housekeeping at the beginning. What are our documents? We go through the exhibits, and then we go through, and your attorney is going to ask you questions. And you're trying to tell your whole story through a series of questions and answers. After that, the trial attorney will ask their questions when they cross-examine, and then your attorney gets to redirect on anything that's applicable to the matter. So we see things like asylum, withholding, convention against torture, adjustment of status, cancellation of removal, 42A, 42B. So the judge will make a decision based on the evidence presented. I will tell you, sometimes there could be 2 or 3 hearings for a final hearing. And so it can be quite long, especially with having translators as well. So let's say you're denied, the judge denies you. Well, then you can file what's called an appeal, and that has to be filed with a filing fee within 30 days of that judge's decision. And then you will wait for what's called the briefing schedule. And that's when you write the big brief as to the argument as to why you should win. And the trial attorney opposing counsel has to write their brief if they want to respond. And so then you wait, and the BIA could appeal. The whole process could take 2 or 3 years sometimes. Now, immigrants' rights in immigration court, they have the rights of due process under the 14th Amendment. They have a right for a hearing before an immigration judge and legal representation if they pay for it. There's nonprofits have some low cost or free legal support, but that's very limited in this country. So it could be through nonprofits or pro bonos, but it's important to have an attorney that is experienced and can help you along the way. So other things to note is that generally you're looking, if you're applying for asylum, you're considering when do you file it and when will you be eligible for work authorization. If you cause any delay, it can stop your asylum clock. Other things that are important to note is that when you need to submit your applications, usually you need to submit it 15 days before a hearing, but they could say you want more time before that. Some judges change their filing deadlines on that, specifically for their case. You don't want to miss a hearing. You want to make sure your address is up to date. And if you miss it, you could get a deportation order in absentia and then need to do a motion to reopen. The sooner you do it, the better. But if it's been a long time, you need to have some really good excuses, a reason why. So there's a lot of things to consider. It could be done while you're detained, or there also could be the expedited removal, which is something that happens for those who are within 100 miles of a border, entered within less than 2 years, and some other considerations where you're not eligible to have it be seen by a judge, and it's also a mandatory detention. So those are things to consider, and I'm hoping that it won't happen, but it might be that Trump tries to expand what expedited removal means. So if you're detained, you need to act quickly. You need to have legal counsel help you, support you along the way. And, there's lots of different things to consider. If the judge approves, denies your forms of relief, then you have the option to appeal. But then if you're detained, for example, you need to stay detained while you're waiting unless you can find a way to get out through some other means. but for the most part, these have serious implications. And like we talked about, appealing a deportation order, that is another potential option. So here at Powers Law Group, we are here to help you. We have a lot of removal, deportation, defense experience, and we speak Spanish, and we have translators in Turkish and French and Portuguese, and actually we speak Portuguese too. We have a lot of different access to different languages. We are here at 713-589-2085. And this is our last webinar for the month of November. We might have another special one, but this is the one about what not to do in immigration court. The rest of our content was here on YouTube and other locations, LinkedIn. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. But you can always reach out to us at 713-589-2085. Again, my name is Ruby Powers.